back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. A near breaking point. That's how John McElroy describes the state of the auto industry. John is a thought leader in the auto industry. That's because he's covered it for decades. He currently broadcasts 3 radio segments on WWJ, writes a blog for Autoblog.com, and a monthly column for Ward's Auto World. He says that the prices of cars are too high and tariffs are hurting the market, and the EV transition has stalled. John spoke with WDET's news director Jerome Vaughn about all these things last week on Mackinac Island during the annual policy conference.
Give me a thumbnail description of where you see the auto industry right now.
Yeah, the auto industry is at a near breaking point, the U.S. auto industry, particularly in Michigan. There is a host of things that is hitting the industry all at once and unprecedented in history. And so it's something where I think we need much greater leadership than what we're seeing right now within the industry itself from our elected leaders as well, because we've seen the U.S. auto industry shrink tremendously over the last couple of decades. And without the proper policies and procedures coming in place, we're in danger of losing a whole lot more.
How much more?
Maybe all of it, because we've seen GM Ford, used to be Chrysler. Now it's a foreign-owned company. But we've seen GM and Ford retreat. GM is essentially an American company with a presence in China and a little bit in South America, but it has abandoned the rest of the world. We see the Ford Motor Company that has a very minor presence in China, mainly as an export hub. It's retreated tremendously in Latin America. It's shrunk tremendously in Europe. And so we see them retreating back into the home market. And even in there, they've given up on small cars. They've pretty much given up on passenger cars and are concentrating solely on SUVs and pickup trucks because that's where they can make money. But at some point, you got to put a flag on the top of the hill and say we're not retreating anymore.
So why is this not something that we are hearing a lot about, right? We hear about, the auto industry, we hear about tariffs, and I'll talk to you about tariffs in a little bit. But you're saying something really pretty dramatic compared to, I think, the general narrative right now about the industry.
Yeah, because, look, if you're the CEO of a car company and if you come out and say, look, our industry has stopped growing, it's going to be very difficult for our companies to grow. We face a myriad of problems, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it. Wall Street is going to excoriate you. Your stock price is going to crash. Consumers are going to say, whoa, if that company's in that much trouble, maybe I better not buy a vehicle from them. So you don't see the industry leaders standing up and saying, this industry needs a lot of help and it needs it yesterday.
Now, one of the things you said, the word you used is leaders, right? We're talking about leadership. What kind of leadership would you like to see from the industry CEOs and CFOs and COOs around this issue?
It goes beyond just the CEOs or the executive suites of the car companies. We need to see this from suppliers. We need to see this from car dealers. We need to see this from the UAW. We need to see a collective recognition that the auto industry is a wealth generator for the American economy. It is a critical component of the national defense, and it's worth keeping. In fact, that's one of the themes that I'm preaching right now, if you will. Do we want an auto industry or not? Because if we don't, okay, then we can just let things sort of run their own course on their own. But if we think we want this auto industry, we think it's important, then we need the kind of collective leadership that says, yeah, here are the policies that we need to put in place to make sure that it's thriving, that it's vibrant, that it's growing. And I'm not talking about subsidies. In fact, that's the last thing I want to see it do. I think we need a market-based approach, but I'll just give you a couple of examples. We have a regulatory environment that is absolutely chaotic for the automotive industry. We've got different agencies writing different rules and regulations with zero coordination between them. That's really hurting the industry. this whole tariff mess, and it's a mess, believe me. We'll see how it sorts out, but right now it has absolutely paralyzed the industry. And then another thing that nobody wants to talk about is we've hit peak auto. We sold more cars in this country 10 years ago than we do today. We sold more cars 20 years ago than we do today. The prices of cars have gotten to the point where we have priced, as an industry, millions of households out of the new car market. So we're not seeing car sales increase. And by the way, this is a global phenomenon, which is very interesting. In fact, the problem's even more acute in Europe and Japan and South Korea than it is here in the U.S., but it's here in the U.S. too. So we don't have an industry that's growing. We have unprecedented technological change going on, not just electric cars, but electric cars have proven to be a problem for the industry. We have, in the U.S. alone, invested nearly $300 billion in the capacity to make EVs. They're just not selling fast enough. Sales are growing, and I personally believe that's the future. We're going to get there. But we've got so much investment that is not providing a return. It's more than an anchor on the industry. It's financially dragging it down.
Let me ask you there about where is the disconnect between the price point that autos are going for and what families can afford? What can be done to bridge that gap? Because I'll just say, as a consumer, I drive an 18-year-old car, right? And so I see what prices are for new things, and I go, that's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's way too much. It's unprecedented, the amount of price increases that we've seen on cars. Historically, you cannot find another period as comparable to now. And so what the industry needs to do is figure out how to greatly take the cost out of engineering, designing, developing, and manufacturing automobiles. And what we've seen is the organizational structure, and I'll use the hometown teams, GM and Ford, as examples. Their organizational structure has grown up over a century. It's highly siloed. You have a design group, you have an engineering group, you have a manufacturing group, and finance and purchasing, and so on and so forth. And even within those silos, like engineering, you have a chassis group, you have a powertrain group, you have a body group, and the list goes on and on. It's very bureaucratic. It's very slow. And so we've seen newcomers, namely Tesla, come into the market, but I would say Rivian is another good example, potentially Lucid, but especially the Chinese, approaching the industry from a completely different way than what the legacy automakers are structured to be able to compete with. They can't do it. They absolutely cannot do it with the structure that they've got right now. And it's going to be more than painful for them to restructure themselves.
Let me ask you, given you're saying that, my mind goes back about 30 years. Did GM have the right idea with Saturn, or did Saturn not go far enough?
Saturn was a brilliant idea in my regard, in my view. I mean, the cars were good. They weren't fantastic, but the selling process of making the buyer just love buying that Saturn and becoming part of this Saturn community. And the fact that the vast majority of people who bought Saturns were not customers of General Motors. In fact, they largely didn't even buy American cars. But here was a brand that stood for something and delivered the goods in a way that, they loved it. And so I was greatly saddened to see Saturn terminated. And it was all part of the bankruptcy process and the like. But the way I love military history, right? And so to me, Saturn was like the D-Day invasion for General Motors. They got a toehold on the beach. They were there. And so instead of pouring all their resources into growing Saturn and giving it the money to grow, they said, no, look, we've given you billions of dollars. Now you've got to figure out how to grow on your own. Like I said, it was doing amazingly good conquest work in bringing in new buyers to General Motors who would never consider going to any of the other GM brands. To me, it was kind of being, and I know people at GM who worked on the whole thing that was going on there, who will violently disagree with me, But to me, it was a major strategic mistake to walk away from that brand.
Just really one more question or a couple of questions. I want to ask you about, where we are right now, where the industry is right now. They are dealing with the uncertainty of tariffs, the promise of tariffs. We're not doing tariffs now. We're doing big tariffs. We're doing medium tariffs. How is the industry dealing with that uncertainty right now?
They're not. I mean, we've got this policy that I'm calling shoot from the hip tariff du jour. And, I can't even keep track of it. And it's part of my job to try to keep track of this stuff. But look, when you don't know, is there going to be a 25% tariff on things coming from Mexico, or is there not going to be coming, or Canada, or anywhere else in the world? And does it apply to components or not, or is it just the non-American content that it applies to? And what is going to be the tariff rate? And we've got to invest as a car company or as a supplier $1 billion in a new facility. Is that really going to pay off or not? We don't know, so we're not going to make the investment. We're going to sit back and see what happens. And that's where the industry is right now. It is completely frozen. No one's spending any money. And we're falling farther behind the Chinese, who have a plan. And that's what we need in the U.S. I know industrial policy is not a popular term in certain political circles. But what I'm saying, what we need right now is a strategy. We need a plan. And shoot from the hip tariff du jour is not a strategy or a plan. It can play a role. I'm not necessarily against the way or applying higher tariffs to make the U.S. industry more competitive, but not in this slapshot way of that it's being done right now. We need a strategy that involves academia, involves our political leadership, involves the industry, and even within the industry, automakers, suppliers, dealers, and as I said before, even labor.
That was WDET News Director Jerome Vaughn speaking with automotive journalist John McElroy. Coming up, for years, the Shakespeare Festival has woven magic into Michigan summers. But this year, the curtain won't rise. We'll find out why. We'll be right back. This is The Metro. You all stay right there.